Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast today, all the way from Paris in France, Richard Medcalf, who's a leadership strategist. He's the founder of XQuadrant, host of the Impact Multiplier CEO Podcast, and he's also author of a new book, Making Time for Strategy. Welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Richard. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I really enjoyed our last one.
Yeah, it's great to be with you again, Jürgen. You've got me early in the morning here in Paris, in Australia, but looking forward to doing this.
Now, if people are wondering, that is a British accent, and you're kind of an expat Brit living in Paris, and you were telling me that you headed home for Christmas. So.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. When you said I was from Paris, I thought I could put on my best French accent and speak to you like you, but my wife would probably hit me. She's French, so she'd probably
Yes. All right. Well, you previously joined me for a conversation on episode 480, and we talked a lot about impact, multiplying your impact versus productivity, and starting with a mission so amazing that it lights you up. They were some of the key takeaways I remember from that episode. Since that conversation, you've written this new book, Making Time for Strategy, and it's subtitled How to Be Less Busy and More Successful, which I'm sure appeals to everybody. And it launches in February. Now, I think this episode is due to publish early February, so it's kind of timed really well. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, digging deeper into some of the ideas of the book. Before we get on to that, now I did ask you the last time what impact you're making in the world, so I'll change that question today and ask you what prompted you to write the book?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it's because of the impact I want to make in the world, actually, so it's a good link. So what gets me out of bed in the morning is helping multiply the impact of smart, successful leaders and helping them achieve what they currently think is impossible. Or out of reach, an order of magnitude impact. And so whenever I start working with those clients, they're often playing at the top of their game. They're CEOs, they're founders, sometimes C-suite execs, extraordinary people. When we sit down, we start thinking, well, how are we actually going to do this? What's it going to look like to really make a big difference in the results that you're generating for your business, for the planet, for your people? One of the first things they always seem to say to me was, Richard, I'm stuck in the weeds. If I'm honest, I'm doing things which I shouldn't be doing at the moment. So, I'm having to deal with operational issues. I need to be focused on the bigger picture. But it's really hard. I'm getting pulled back into all this stuff. And I know I need to let go of that somehow. And I just had so many of these conversations, and we had so many kind of breakthroughs in those discussions that I realized, this needs to be, I need to put this down on paper, right? What I've actually learned and experienced through these conversations.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You mentioned something there that I think, and you talk about in the book, the idea that people often get into these leadership positions because they're good at something. So they're good at their job, they're good at specific areas of where they add value, and they're the expert in that particular area. And you mentioned they're stuck in the weeds, so that they kind of tend to get stuck doing those activities on an ongoing basis, and sometimes those activities are repetitive activities. And you also talk about the infinity trap, which is like if somebody's making a career and they're advancing, or they want to take on more opportunities or more responsibilities, there's more getting added to the plate, but it's like there is no overflow. It's there is an overflow, but it's not by design, right? So stuff falls off the plate. So, talk to us a little bit more, first of all, about this concept of understanding. I've gotten to this great role I have right now because I'm the expert in this particular field. But at some point, I've got to get somebody else to be the expert in that field so I can move on.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we're doing what made us successful last year and not what is going to make us successful next year, right? That's the problem. We're because we're attached to the thing that made us successful. And Yeah, I see it time and time again, right? And most leaders, when I start working with them, I ask them, it's a great question to ask. It's like, what's the shift in you that you want to make to multiply your impact? Like, go from this to this. And when you start to think about what's that shift, you realize you really do have to leave behind some of the, reinvent your success formula. You have to change it. A lot of people will say, you know what, I've been successful because I've been, a doer, for example, a problem solver, hands-on, making things happen. But in my new role, I need to be more of a visionary leader, perhaps, or a strategic leader, or I need to be empowering my team to make these things happen and not doing them myself, for example. And so when you start to get clear on that shift, that's a really important thing, because you start to realize that I need to start to act in another way. Now, the problem is the infinity trap, as you mentioned. And the infinity trap is, well, let's face it, we all have too much to do. We have too many messages coming in, too many social media things we want to check, too many conversations to have, too much content. It's infinite, right? It never stops. You watch one movie and you get 10 more recommended. You read one book, you get 10 more recommended. You send one email and you get 2 more back, right? It's never ending. And so what we try to do is we run faster and faster, trying to deal with all this. And we hit that ceiling of complexity. There's no more hours in the day. We're maxed out. And so our impact has now hit a ceiling. And so that's the infinity trap, because actually, whilst that's happening, it actually feels quite good and we feel productive. We're being busy, we're getting things done, but we're kind of
ticking lots of stuff off the list, right?
Yeah, we're taking stuff off, and we're probably being more productive than all the people around us in ways. But we're actually it's incremental progress at this point. We're not going to get the breakthroughs. We're working hard, and we're not leveling up at that point. So I think that's kind of really the infinity trap, is that it actually feels good, and we know we're kind of super busy and crazy busy and haven't got quite time to think. But what I like to say, that's the problem. We talked about getting stuck in repetitive tasks. Well, often we're using our time, to do the things that we all do every week, every month, every quarter, every time we get a new customer. And that's the problem, because we're spending all our time doing those things rather than the new things that are going to get us to another level. I give you, an example. One of my clients was one of my group programs was a mid to senior level finance manager. And when I first worked with him, he was completely overloaded. He was had no time, working silly hours, completely tired. So I can't, I've got a team, but they're not ready. They can't take this stuff on. I'm completely overwhelmed, So I know I need to delegate, but I can't really, etc. Well, fast forward a couple of months, he was able to go to literally 2 months, and he was able to go to his boss and say, hey, I'm a bit of a loose end. What new responsibilities can I take? And he ended up taking responsibility for a much larger part of the business. And one of the breakthroughs was him realizing, when we looked at it together, 30% of his time was spent what I call keeping the lights on, doing some of the finance processes that came up every month, doing the sales commissions, doing the payroll reconciliation, these kind of things. And he'd become successful because he went into this business which had archaic, complicated systems and figured it all out and became the go-to person. That was how he became successful. But then he was like the only person who knew how to do it, and he was spending 30% of his time. And I said to him, look, that's not going to make you CFO. All that stuff, it's just the electricity bill. It's just, it has to be done. It's not any more value add at this stage. It's important, but it's not going to get you to where you want to go. And that was the click moment for him. He realized, oh yeah, there's that huge amount of time from these 3 processes that I do. So I need to, as a priority, invest my time. This is the difference. Instead of using your time, you need to invest time. So I said, invest some time. It might be a bit painful for a couple of weeks, but invest time to start to free it up. So how can you train your team on a part? How can you break a part of this out, train them, empower them, get them to go and figure it out the way that you figured it out 5 years ago, whatever it takes. But we started to work on how we could actually do that. And within a couple of months, because it had that shift, that actually this was not actually anymore what's going to make him successful. He started to see his role in a different way, his role as a manager in a different way, his team in a new way. And 2 months later, he'd got rid of it all, and he was freed up, and he took on a broader role in the commercial part of the business.
Yeah. That's a really great example. And thinking back, I mean, particularly if you're in a team like that, or you're leading a team like that in a company, thinking back to my corporate days, one of the things I saw often was, on the one hand, the team supporting an executive like that were keen to grow themselves, were keen to take on additional responsibilities, and they would have welcomed, hey, teach me how you do this thing that you've figured out, and I'll take it over. On the other hand, there was often a sense by the executives that was a risk to their business. So how do you go about shifting the mindset? I mean, I think you hinted at it there by saying that executive's not going to become CFO, or they're not going to advance or grow or take the next step unless they get their team to take on some of these other activities.
Right. You're absolutely right. So mindset is a key part of it, because what we do is not based on reality. It's based on what we think is possible, desirable, and necessary. And so if we believe it's necessary for us to maintain this thing and have no risk in the system, just do it ourselves, then that's what will happen. And so how do you hack that? Well, there's a few areas, but one of the ones is actually to think about the stakeholder relationships. Because one of the points I make in the book is that influence is a key part to freeing yourself up. And often we don't actually renegotiate the expectations of the people around us. We don't recreate new agreements. I love to give the example. If you want to lose a few pounds, if you want to go on a diet, it's going to be your family that keep offering you the chocolate cake, right, or the glass of wine, or whatever it is, because they quite like the way things are. They quite like being able to eat the chocolate cake themselves and not feel guilty because you're eating it with them, right? So they're the ones who are likely to kind of sabotage your very goal, your success. Not because they're mean, but just because they like the way it's set up and you haven't explained anything different. In business, it's the same. So let's imagine that you say, you know what, my team needs to take this on. It might not be quite done for a couple of months. It might not be quite the standard that I've done it. Well, that might be okay. You can perhaps go, but you might need to go and explain that to your colleagues. Hey, we're shifting how we're doing this in the team because I've been called up to do some really key transformational projects. So I can't do what I was doing for you before. But it's a great opportunity to build the team, right? So we're going to give the project to so-and-so. They're going to manage it. I will be having an oversight view role. But just please be aware if there's a couple of wrinkles in the first couple of months, let me know. We'll deal with it, etc. So you can renegotiate that, make sure they're comfortable, and they'll give you a bit of permission for a couple of months, perhaps, to adjust that. Or they'll understand when the presentation is not quite as great as it used to be, that it's not your personal ability that's gone down, it's your focus has changed, and perhaps that's a bit of the cost.
So you may even say, well, how can we help? How can we help? And maybe we can even make the process easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the key thing. So I like to say strategic time is your number one indicator of success. So it is really important to work on this. So when people are a bit like, you know what, I'm not sure I can really do this. My point is, look, if you're spending your time using your time on all these recurring processes, you don't have enough time for what I call strategic time. That's the time to think about the important things, be creative, create breakthrough ideas, work on projects that build new capabilities and make everything easier in the future. That's strategic time. That's the time which is the precious stuff where you're investing it in future success. the difference between between great executives and like, average executives, it is really their ability to make that investment, because that's how you get the curve moving up, right? When we stagnate and when we get into that incremental, it's because we're running so fast. It's back to incremental. Let me give you an example. When I was in strategy consulting, I was a junior analyst at the beginning of building business cases in Excel, this kind of thing for clients. And after several months, I realized that there's a lot of similarities in what we were doing here. Each time we would pretty much build it from scratch, or perhaps hack an existing business case and start from there. So I decided to build a template. I decided to spend my own time in the evenings, in the evenings pretty much after I did a long day of consulting, working on this template. I made it beautiful. I made little modules that you could copy and paste to quickly build up a business plan. I had charts and things that were quite flexible, that looked nice. The financial model was pretty well built. And it took me quite a while to build this, a couple of weeks probably. My colleagues were like, Richard, what are you doing geeking around on Excel when you could be going home or working on some sold client work to get your metrics up? But I thought it was important. And what happened was suddenly I became the most productive consultant there was, because what other people took a week doing, I could do in a morning. Because I had invested in a new capability. And so that strategic time that I was investing, slightly painful for a couple of weeks, catapulted my career. I mean, I became the youngest ever partner in the business. Now, not just because of that one thing, but I think that mindset really helped, because whilst everybody else was building things from scratch, I was focused on the value-added work each time. I was leveling up my focus. Whilst they were still building the same old formula time and time again, I was now getting involved in project management, business development, selling work. I was learning new skills. And so this is, for me, just a tiny little example from very early in my career. But for me, it's quite a good one, because it shows that strategic time helped me accelerate my curve. And if I had just used my time thinking, I'm so busy on client projects, then I'd have been doing that forever. And so that's why I say strategic time is the number one metric that governs your future success as a leader, no matter how high you are, how far you've come. That's why I wrote the book, because it's so essential for us to get out of that hamster wheel and actually invest in capabilities that make our future better.
Yeah. And hamster wheel's a good analogy. I was thinking that earlier around the vision of a hamster treading on and not getting anywhere. You mentioned one thing there that I'd love to pick up on as well, and it's the idea of picking up new skills and learning new skills. I mean, that's a key part of taking on additional responsibilities or advancing your career, isn't it? Picking up new skills and developing additional capability. And the only way you can do that and spend time on that is to take that time from somewhere else, right?
I mean, I actually call it strategic laziness. Strategic laziness is actually, the way I look at things is, like in any domain of life, you can either work hard or work smart, I guess, right? And so I'm always thinking, because I'm probably fundamentally quite lazy somehow, so I'm always going like, how can I, if I could just improve my skill in this area, I'll get better results with less effort. And so I'm always thinking about that, I think, in all the areas I'm working. Where am I working too hard and not getting a result, or as big a result as I could? And then for me, the question is, okay, what skill can I build on that area? But sometimes it's hard to step back and have those questions unless you create this bit of space in your life. So strategic time doesn't have to be this insurmountable thing that you might feel is unrealistic. I always encourage people, take a tiny step. Take a tiny step. So if you have nothing in your week, find 5 minutes and make that 5 minutes pay off and give you 10 minutes next week or in 2 weeks' time. And then when you've got 10 minutes, you can reinvest that time to make things a bit better in the future. So I would always say start small and start to build that muscle to get big results that compound, right? It's like finance, compound interest. It's better to invest that dollar today because it's going to pay back more and more over time. Whereas
exactly, yeah.
It's really important, the value of time in all of this. We need to start making it work now.
And building it as a habit to start with, I think, is probably the key thing, isn't it? Even if it is just 5 minutes, but making that 5 minutes a habit so that that's protected, those 5 minutes as strategic time, where I think about things, where I look at all of the things from a helicopter view of what's on my plate, and maybe decide what are my most important activities, what can I do to take some of these things off the plate that are not my most important activities. They could be somebody else's most important activities.
Yeah, and sometimes, what you can just make it really simple and I call it strategic naivety. You just simply say, I know I've got a load of stuff I need to do, but I'm going to play. I'm going to mess around. I'm going to invest in this thing that I think will be cool. So when I was at Cisco, in my first couple of months, we'd done a major initial project that I'd worked on with a customer. And I decided to take a day, it's got a lot of time, a whole day, to write up that piece of work, to build some thought leadership around it, to kind of generalize the insights we'd learned, which were quite leading edge, and make them available on a more generic basis to different customers and different segments, and make it something more relevant to them. I built a financial model. I built a PowerPoint deck, slide deck. I wrote a little 2-page, white paper or 4-page white paper on the topic, find some insights. And that day was a little bit weird because nobody was asking me to do this. Nobody was on my back. In fact, there were other things I should have been doing in a way. I knew I could manage those deadlines, so I wasn't too concerned. But, and by the end of the day, I was actually feeling a bit down. I remember it. I was like, why have I done this? What a waste. Why am I doing this? But some part of me said, no, it's important to do this, like really maximize the value of what you've just done. Otherwise, it's just going to, puff of smoke is going to disappear. So I did the work, I wrote this stuff, and there was other things I could have been doing, but it was a game changer for me. It was a game changer because suddenly this thing got picked up. It was read at senior levels. My boss sent me comments, say, hey, I circulated this thing and look at what so-and-so said. He's super senior. I was invited to customer workshops and presentations and all sorts of things all around the world because of this investment that I made of one day. Now, it's so easy for me to say, no one's asking for this. I've got other things to be doing. But I'd love to say the most important project is the one that nobody is asking for.
Yeah.
Because everyone's asking me for operational stuff. But when you invest, that's normally what they're not expecting that. But that's the thing that's going to be the breakthrough.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story from my corporate career. And it was a similar kind of thing. So we had some products that we sold into manufacturers, and they used those products, and they were quite a challenge to work with. So what would happen was, and I was one of the few technical people that understood them, and I built a team around me of technical people that also understood how to use these products. So what would happen, we'd get called all around the world, can you go to this particular customer, spend a week there and help them get this thing working in production. So we'd go there and we'd do that, and I'd travel all around the world doing that, and eventually I built up this team that were also experts. And at some point I thought, each time I'm there, the first thing I have to do essentially is train the people who are doing implementing this product in their products, is train them in fundamentals of our products and how you use them, and why you have to do this rather than that, and what to do if that happens, and so on. And I thought, what if I wrote a training program, and what if we actually ran a training program, brought in people from our customers to us, and we're in an attractive location, so they were sort of attractive, and we sold that. And we actually wrote a complete training program for these products and started running these workshops where we brought research people, manufacturing people from the customers in, ran those. And as a result, I started getting invited to our company all around the world to implement these training programs for all the different divisions in the regions. And we wrote it all up, and we had books and we had slide decks and everything. And we actually designed experiments that people hands-on ran in simulated laboratory conditions to manufacture stuff and all kinds of stuff. And it was actually a lot of fun. But all of a sudden now, and as a result of that, the sale of these products within about 2 years virtually went up tenfold. And before that, everybody had said, oh, well, you know, one of the difficulties with this product and growing the sales is people just have trouble using them. They're just too difficult to use.
Yeah, that's a great, fantastic, perfect example of this. Perfect example. I love to say to people, you know, perhaps your problem with you being too productive, because you can either be productive or you can be creative. And when you say that, people go, oh yeah, you know, that's so right, because we can run around, you know, being productive, training customers all around the world. But if you start and go, okay, let's be creative about this. And creativity isn't immediate. You know, you have to like, oh, how would we design this program? You have that piece of paper, you're doodling, you spend an hour, it doesn't look quite right, you throw it away. Being creative is not productive. It involves dead ends and failure and trying again and getting back up again. But that's where the breakthroughs come. And as you said, the results become, that's what you got, breakthrough result, 10x sales.
Yeah.
That's why I talk about incremental versus exponential. So you got an exponential result because you addressed one of the barriers that was keeping everybody in incrementalism, you know, which is we need to run around and train this customer and train that customer. You step back, we build a new capability. And that's really why I wrote the book, because that's what the game I'm trying to get my customers, my clients to do, right, is to make that exponential impact. Thank you for a brilliant example. I'm going to steal that, I think, and tell everybody else about your example.
So one of the things with an example like that is we have to step back and make some time for that. Now, sometimes we can say, okay, I'm going to invest some of my own time, but even that's flawed, isn't it? Because we make sacrifices there, whether it's our relationships or the things that keep us balanced, our hobbies or whatever it might be. How do we identify where we can take some time to set something aside for that strategic time, for that thinking time or planning or coming up with some creative ways to be more productive in that sense?
Yeah, so this is where I guess we get into the tactical element. If you've had a look at the book, so the book's structured around these 4 areas: tactics, influence, mindset, and environment. And they're all really important. We've talked about influence a little bit already, how we renegotiate. We've talked about mindset, because we need to hack our own thinking about these things. But tactics is important. Sometimes people over-rotate on tactics because they're looking for the next productivity hack. But when you've got a world of infinity, you can't outrun infinity with productivity. However, there is an important righting of the ship that needs to be done. So when we're overwhelmed, drowning in all this infinity of tasks and all these commitments we've made, you're right, like we can't just find magical time, extra time for this strategic thinking. So we do need to address the current situation. And so we need to get very, very tactical and blocking and tackling for a little bit to deal with this. What I like to say is you need to know your beginning, your end, and have a time frame, first of all. So create a mini project plan. Very simple. So you need to know, like, how many hours do I actually have right now for this stuff? You might say 0, or you might say I have 10 minutes, or I have half an hour on a Monday morning, whatever. But how much time do I currently have, and how much time do I want to have? And when do I want to create that time? So first of all, really make a commitment to yourself. I'm going to free up 3 hours a week or an hour a week or whatever you want. Then the next thing is to get very practical and go through what I call a commitment inventory exercise. So you really actually get to list out the different obligations that you have, things that you do weekly, monthly, yearly, daily, and so forth. And then there's a few ways you can kind of rank those and score those. I go through that a bit in the book, and there's some templates and things there that people can get. But fundamentally, if you keep it very simple, you get a list of things that you do, and then you need to look at the list. And I take people through in the book a 5-step process called CRASH. So there's 5 ways that you can kind of look at your tasks and shrink them down in different ways. So perhaps the most important or the most powerful 2 of the 5 are the first 2, cut and reduce. So the first one is very simply, you're going to look at what is no longer serving me. What should I not be doing? Like, what can I just get rid of? And now again, there's a implementation plan you'll need to do that. Like, you might need to go and talk to your boss or to your colleagues or so forth. But some things you can just perhaps stop doing. That one-to-one that's getting a bit stale. Perhaps you don't need that anymore. Perhaps you can take a break and say, well, let's revisit whether we want to do that again next financial year. That team meeting you feel you have to go to, or that old hands call. Well, perhaps actually you don't need to be there trying to multitask and being ineffective in that time. So you can start to cut. And the next one is you can reduce. And reducing it is, so cut is, I call it like the pure, powerful action. It's like the sword, cutting through, cleaving things. It's powerful. It can be a bit scary because we get FOMO and everything else going on. But actually, it is a really powerful thing, and you need to find some things to cut. But then reduce gives you these extra options. Perhaps you can't cut something completely, but perhaps you can do other things. Perhaps you can reduce frequency. So I'm not going to attend that meeting every week, but I'm going to attend it every 2 weeks or every month. Perhaps you can reduce perhaps the scope of what you actually do in that intervention. So I'll come to the first half hour of that 2-hour session, but I've got a commitment after that. So you can start to look at things like, how I can reduce, on frequency, on scope, even on quality. I'm not going to give you the full write-up that I used to do from that meeting. Instead, I'll send you the screenshot that I took of the whiteboard. Sometimes that's fine, right? Perhaps that's good enough.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's various ways you can start to look at, how do I reduce my involvement in different ways. We can go through the other ones if you want. For example, there's assign, which is about delegating, right? So, who can I assign this to? And always a part of this, which I can at least assign to somebody else to free me up. And the point is, often these things can seem quite minor in the moment. Like, it takes me 5 minutes. It takes me a minute even. But it's
actually, right?
They do all add up. And more to the point, it's your mental load. Because when you've got 10 things that only take you a minute to do, it's still quite hard to really get into the zone of strategic thinking. Because they're just quick things to do. You'll get a quick buzz from doing them. So there's a pull to those. And it's just another thing that you need to get off your plate. And so don't despise those small wins. They do build up. And more to the point, they clear the decks of the noise.
That's right. Yeah, it's sort of like reducing the multitasking, which is like you say, it's a cognitive load that actually reduces your impact in other bigger areas. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, exactly. So, but the main message here is that when we're overloaded, we do need to go through, I call it the crash diet, right? It's go through these 5 levers.
Love it. Yeah.
Go through these 5 levers to make a meaningful impact in your use of time. From then on, there's techniques you might need to use to maintain that, to maintain your focus. But there is this initial period where you need to say, right now I'm running a deficit. I don't have enough time for what I need to be doing. It's like a business that's cash flow negative, losing money every month. Well, we need to make some dramatic shifts so that we're actually in profit. And most people, they're running a negative account on their own time.
Yes, yeah, I love that analogy. And there's so much. I mean, I used to be a time management junkie, and I always devoured books when I was very young in my early corporate career, and I was probably in this situation where things just kept piling on. I did a couple of things well, so people thought, okay, we can give him some more work to do because he's done all this stuff pretty well.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, the plate was full and overflowing. And so I was always into this time management stuff. And the breakthrough for me was Stephen Covey's book, First Things First, and the philosophy that he has in that book is, first of all, identify what are your life priorities, what are your business priorities, career priorities, and then outline those, and then look at, okay, what are the big rocks that, so here's the jar which represents your time. What are the big rocks that you need to do to achieve all these goals?
Sure.
And he starts off with values and everything. So it's really understanding the fundamentals, and then the big rocks, okay, put the big rocks in, and then go for the smaller pebbles, and then the sand and the water at the end, which is the metaphor that I don't know where that came from, but it's a pretty graphic metaphor, isn't it? Because typically looking at all these little things, what we do is put in the sand and water first, and then there's no room for the rocks.
Yeah, of course, that's it. But the problem is that we have this infinite load coming at us. So if we do this, it's so easy for us to, we might do it once and do an exercise and then it comes back, which is why in the book I do try and really focus on these deeper challenges. The tactical part is part of it. Yeah. But it's mindset challenge. It's mindset challenges. Are we going to have the difficult conversation, or what we think are going to be difficult conversations with superiors, with our peers, with our team? Are we actually going to rethink why we're driven to act in certain ways? I tell my clients things like, stop adding so much value. What do you mean? Like, well, you're adding value in places which you shouldn't be adding value in anymore. Yeah. You've got bigger fish to fry, but you're getting distracted. But you're adding value, in the wrong places.
Well, sometimes we add value in the wrong places because it's our own ego, isn't it? It's not actually, nobody's looking for it, and nobody's else is deriving any value from it. But our ego is like, we need to present this in this way.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I think hopefully the book's got a bit of a different take on it, because I'm not just saying here's some productivity hacks. But there's the mindset, there's the leadership, all these deeper things, which I found in the coaching work is the things that got the clients to have their breakthrough. Often it's just like one shift in their identity that will make a huge difference. One client I worked with was completely, he said, I can't get to my critical projects because I need to be reliable and trustworthy and get back to all my teammates about all their requests that they've got for me. And he was a C-level member of a multi-billion organization, right? He'd just been promoted to the board. And he'd been making great progress on these big transformational initiatives that we'd kicked off together. But he was finding himself bogged down in all the emails and everything else. And we went through the conversation. And basically what I ended up saying to him is, look, I can't help you with your time management problems. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, because you want to be trustworthy and reliable, right? I was like, yeah, I want to be a good team player. So I said, okay, well, what about your CEO? What does he want you to be doing? And what does your board want you to do? And what do your colleagues and your clients? And cut a long story short, he went through all that list and said, yeah, well, they all want me to do this big transformational project that's going to make a big difference to the employee experience, to the customers, to the financial bottom line. So I said, so I put it to you that actually when you're stuck in your inbox, you're actually being unworthy and unreliable, untrustworthy, not a team player as a leader, because you're doing the easy stuff and not the stuff that you're getting paid the big bucks for. And that was a shift for him once he realized, my identity is out of kilter here. Yeah. When he made that shift, everything else became easy. I didn't need to teach him how to use his Google filters or, tag his tasks in his time management app or whatever, whatever. It was, now I see, actually, this is what I need to be doing, and this is not what I need to be doing. And it's that shift that we often can't even see ourselves, because for us, that seems important and that seems not important. And I'm the kind of person that always does this, and all these things come up. Yeah. And those are our very barriers that we need to get through.
Yeah, I think that's where certainly the value of your book is, in that, particularly in that mindset thing. The other thing I took away also was the influence part, and enlisting other people in the changes in your own building strategic time and using time more effectively. So I took that away. The mindset thing, I think, though, is really important. And it reminds me again of something else, another little story from our days in the corporate world. And it was when the BlackBerries, so I'm dating myself a little bit here, when the BlackBerries first came on the scene, and all our sales people got this new gadget, which meant that they could have their access to their email anywhere they were. So they were traveling a lot, obviously, going out to see clients. So this made them more efficient because they could do email on the road as well as take phone calls and so on. And often there'd be conversations in groups where the salespeople or the people that had the BlackBerries would say, this is a real nuisance, because now we're getting buzzed all the time by emails and messages and all this kind of stuff, which we never had before because we didn't have this device with us. And I remember saying, you can turn those alerts off. and people wouldn't do it. People wouldn't even say, well, could you show me how to turn it off? and it's really that mindset, isn't it? Because they had this belief that we respond quickly to any queries that come in.
Over responsiveness. Like, you can be too responsive. Yeah, responsiveness is not always good. Responsiveness is what, in a system, if the needle is doing this, it's because it's too responsive, right? It's all noise. There's no signal. And that's often how we live our life. We're jumping from ping to ping. It's all noise.
Yeah. But it's like the mindset thing really highlights for me what I didn't understand in those days. I said, well, why don't people just turn the alerts off? I mean, they can still enjoy the value of that tool and the benefits that it provides.
They feel they need to. That's the thing. If you feel you need to, it's important for you, then that's the world you live in. So my challenge is those things that you think you need to, that it was not possible not to, that's the path of your breakthrough. Because when you go, it'll be okay if I don't respond in the instant to these things. Then your world changes.
All right. Well, Richard, this is fascinating. I think I'd like to go through the buzz questions again with you. I know you've done them once before, but I'm going to ask them in a slightly different way. I'll ask them sort of focused a lot more on this idea of being more productive and focused, building the strategic time. So first question then, what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more productive?
Well, to be more productive, I would first of all identify which is your number one blocker, right? Identify which is your number one blocker. So it might be tactics, it might be influence, it might be mindset, it might be the business environment in which you're operating. And then focus on dealing with that key blocker. Don't try and do everything at once.
Yeah, I love it. So, and that comes back to that assessment you were talking about earlier, and maybe doing the crash.
Yeah, well, there's actually an assessment on the website. I can give you a link in a second to that. But I have got like a 20-question assessment people can do, and it will give you a score in each of those 4 areas and actually help you identify where do you want to focus. Because if you focus in the wrong place and you won't see movement, and you're super busy, so you'll give up. So it's really important. That's why I help people in the book to really try to identify where do you need to start. Because if your mindset is off, the tactical stuff is not going to make any difference. If you can't influence people, even if you've got the best mindset possible, you're still not going to make progress, and so forth. That's why it's really important to get specific. I say that there is an assessment. I've actually put it at the XQuadrant.com, my company, XQuadrant.com/Innova.Buzz, and people can find it there along with the link to the book and everything else.
Excellent. Wonderful. I might just refer people back to some of these other questions, but I wanted to jump into the recommendation, or what would you like the listener to do as a result of our conversation today, apart from buying the book and reading the book?
Obviously buy the book, obviously.
Yeah.
So as I said, I would definitely head over to that link, the XQuadrant.com/Innova.Buzz, and do the assessment, because that will help you really focus in. You can also get a couple of chapters of the book for free and all that kind of stuff there as well. But I suppose practical, okay, you might or might not want to buy the book, and that's fine. What can you do yourself to become more strategic? And I'm going to say, that slot in your diary that says strategic work or whatever you have. A lot of people have that in their diary. It doesn't work, right? And the reason it doesn't work is because, number one, it's bland title that you don't take seriously, and possibly your colleagues don't take seriously. So they overschedule meetings on it, and you don't even, when you get there, you're not quite sure what to do.
It's kind of the default overflow, isn't it?
Exactly. So the first thing is give that thing a name that makes it really important for you, and if other people have access to your diary, that they are not going to put something over that. So critical board project. I mean, the board is yourself, or whatever, whatever you want to call it, or you have to come up with a good name, but it has to be a name which inspires you and excites you about what you're doing, right? So make next quarter wildly successful, whatever it is, a name that inspires you. But the second thing is that the reason it doesn't work is when you get there, do you know exactly what you're going to do? Because think strategically. So vague. It's a recipe for procrastination. It's vague, ambiguous. You don't know what you don't know what success looks like. So you may as well go and do an email, because you get a quick buzz when you tick off that email from your to-do list. So what I'm going to suggest is, spend 3 minutes brainstorming what are the big questions that I should be thinking about. What are the big questions in my business, in my role? What things do I want to be thinking about? If I had the time, what would I want to be finding answers to? So you might go, just take 3 minutes, put the timer on. Don't make it stressful. Just brainstorm. Quantity, go for quantity, not quality. Just any question comes to mind. I need to think about, how we deal with the fact, how can we get more people to do training for our business, right? Actually, do we even need more people? How else could we do training more effectively? How could we not, how could we scale more effectively in that? How do I develop my team? What does each person in my team actually need from me right now as their leader? How can I wow my boss with the current project? How will artificial intelligence change what we're doing in the next 2 years? I mean, you name it. I'm just brainstorming randomly right here.
Yeah.
You spend 3 minutes writing those questions down. Now, suddenly, there might be projects there, ideas.
Yeah.
You've elevated your focus already as a leader. And so when that little half-hour slot or hour slot comes along on a Friday, you know what you can do with it. You're actually excited because there's things you want to work on. It's not just this ambiguous, amorphous gap in your diary.
Excellent. Yeah, great suggestion. And I love some of the questions. So there's a couple of prompts that everyone, a listener, can take on board and maybe develop your own from there. Love it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I suggest. Just take 3 minutes. Often when I give people 3 minutes and I come back after 3 minutes, they normally tell me to go away because they're so in the flow. The ideas are coming. They're seeing the value. So, but give yourself 3 minutes, put a timer on. Making time for strategy. Strategy is not meant to be this big, scary thing that only corporate leaders do once in a year. You know, for me, strategy is about what's the biggest leverage that I have available. What's the most important thing that I can be doing? The most important question I can be solving that's going to make the biggest difference for future success. And we can always be asking ourselves that question.
Love it. All right. Well, Richard, where can people find out more about XQuadrant, the work you do, and of course, get a hold of the book?
Yeah. So obviously xquadrant.com is the business. You can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. The book is at makingtimeforstrategy.com, as well as on the business website. And I said, if you go to the Innova.Buzz link I mentioned before, xquadrant.com/Innova.Buzz, there'll be a link to the assessment directly there, a link to the book. I'll put a couple of other resources there. So it's probably the go-to place if you want to make it easy for yourself.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to getting my full copy and when it launches. And I certainly encourage people to check out those links and do the assessment. You'll probably be amazed at what you learn. So thanks so much for another great conversation today, Richard. I've enjoyed this immensely. I'm kind of inspired some more to get a hold of the full book. I have read, I think it's 2 or 3 chapters that's available on that website, which I've read through, and there's a couple of other bullet points, and I've heard you talking about it in other podcasts, but I am looking forward to getting a hold of the entire book and looking at some of the tactical stuff as well, but also learning more about the mindset and the enlisting other people in these endeavors. So it's sort of time management is a team game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, Jürgen, it's been a lot of fun. I always love your thoughtful question style, and you brought some great examples, which I say I'll be probably using as great illustrations of that principle.
You can use them to share. Yeah,
yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, and so I think that's just such a great takeaway, right? Perhaps a good place to wrap is there is that choice of the hamster wheel or the flywheel, and it is that finding strategic time is really the only way to get from one to the other. And so hopefully some of what I've shared has been useful for your audience.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Richard. And please do stay in touch. All the best for the book launch.
Thanks, Jürgen. Take care.